Hello, and welcome to Truck Talk number 4. Now, I pretty much have the one topic that I want to cover in this Truck Talk, which you saw in the title, but I have a few other little things to talk about first. One was just to bring you a bit of an update on my situation. After having been in the hospital for over 2 months, my dad is now completely out. He's through rehab. He went home, as I'm recording this, yesterday afternoon. Now, in the interest of medical privacy, I'm not going to go into the details of that, but it ended up being a challenging and complicated situation. The small hospital we were in originally was unable to decode what was going on with him. We finally went to a larger hospital in a bigger city with other specialists who got it figured out, got his treatment underway, and he is much, much better. So as you might have seen, I did get out this past week for a little camping trip, and it was great to get out and do some filming. Thank you so much for your patience and understanding as I went through this period of being out of town, away from home, and unable to tend to my usual work. And thank you all also for the many wishes we received for a successful recovery for my dad. The other video that I recently put out was talking about my attempted gutter on the back of the camper. And that elicited a ton of comments and suggestions. And as I am in the process of trying to catch up on many, many fronts back at home, I have not been able to go in and address all of the many comments that I received on that video. A couple of things I did want to clarify, because I received many suggestions about putting some kind of membrane between the hatch and the camper body to catch the rain going through. Now, I did actually talk about that in the video, and maybe I wasn't clear enough about what I was saying, but that is the first thing that I considered. The problem with that approach is that because of the sort of forward tilt of the back of the camper and then the sort of taper inward of the door itself, even with some sort of a membrane across that space that would indeed catch the rain, dripping down between the door and the camper, at the ends of that membrane still would end up dripping their water down into the camper. And I tried to explain that, and I tried to show that. The problem is that at the end of it here, this where, this thing would essentially form a gutter, and whatever water was up there would come out right at this point. It still would be dripping down right inside the camper right here. Apparently it wasn't clear enough, but that solution is ultimately not going to work, because it's simply going to funnel all of the water directly into 2 puddles, directly into the back of the truck. Several people suggested just sticking a pool noodle up into that little gap between the awning and the camper, and that's actually a really good idea. I might actually give that a try. There were also several people who suggested, just adding some sort of metal steel to the back of the camper so that I could use magnets. I think that's a pretty good solution. And another suggestion, which I thought was brilliant, was to run a strip of Velcro along the back of the camper so that I could just basically flip that flap of the awning up, which has that flap of the awning has, 1/2 of Velcro on it, and could flip it up. And if it had the other type of Velcro on the camper above the door, could just flip that flap up and Velcro it right to the camper, and then that would form a gutter, and that should fully get the water out and away from falling into the camper. So those are things that I may actually experiment with. And thanks to all of you who watched the video and had various solutions. There were way more solutions than I could possibly address here. I really enjoy presenting these things to you guys, because you always have interesting ideas. I really like hearing your suggestions. Thank you very much. So now let's move on to the actual topic of this Truck Talk. So this is a question that I've received in one form or another many times over the years, and it may take the shape of, do you miss the Forester? What do you miss about the Forester? Or how is the Frontier better than the Forester? How is the Forester better than the Frontier? Various forms basically of saying, which is better, the Frontier or the Forester? Now, there are a number of ways that my Forester, and that was a 2012 Subaru Forester, there are a number of ways that it was better than the Frontier. There are also a number of ways that the Frontier is better than the Forester. So let's talk about things that I miss about the Forester, or ways that I feel the Forester was a better vehicle than the Frontier. Now, the first and probably most obvious one is simply gas mileage. That little car, while it didn't get super good gas mileage, it definitely got better gas mileage than the Frontier. Now, the Frontier, configured as I have it now with the camper, I can get 17 to 20 miles per gallon on the highway, on a flat highway, not going uphill, doing, 65 miles per hour. Around town, that drops to around 12 to 13 miles to the gallon. And when I'm on the trail, sometimes that drops even further, depending on how fast or slow, how much stop and go I'm doing on the trail. It can be down in the, 9-10 miles per gallon, sometimes a little bit more than that. So it's not terrible gas mileage as far as a truck goes, but the Forester did get better gas mileage. The Forester, while I didn't have super precise tracking or numbers on the Forester, I was usually getting, in highway driving, 22, 23 miles to the gallon, maybe 24, if all the conditions were just right. And around town and on the trail, I was generally getting maybe 16 to 18 miles to the gallon. So that is one thing that I do miss about the Forester, because it costs me less to travel X amount of miles. Now, I will say, for some of the gains that I've received with the Frontier in terms of space and capability, I feel it's a fair trade-off. I don't mind that I'm burning a little more fuel because I'm getting a lot in return for it. Now, another thing that I miss about the Forester, another way the Forester was far superior to the Frontier, was simply how nimble it was. That small car could turn around anywhere. I did not even need a wide spot in the trail. I could turn that car around anywhere. And as you've often seen in my videos, when I'm driving up these narrow, overgrown P&W trails, I very often end up in these places that they become more and more overgrown until they taper down to nothing at all. Being able to turn around in those situations and drive back up the trail is far superior than what I often have to do in the Frontier, which is back up and back up and back up. I think I've backed up for even as much as close to a mile in one situation, that gets hard on the neck when you're looking back out over your shoulder trying to back up. With the Frontier, I have to find a big enough spot to turn it around. The turning radius on the Frontier is notoriously bad, and even when I do find a wide spot, it is often a multiple forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward. So as someone who really enjoys exploring these unmaintained, unused, forgotten little trails in the Pacific Northwest, the Forester was far superior in that situation where I would often need to turn around. Now, one other funny little quirk, and a positive quirk for me driving the Forester, was the fact that I was driving something that was not necessarily designed to be going off-road. Now, it did great. I took that car in all kinds of places it never should have been, and I had all kinds of people tell me that I shouldn't be driving it that way. But it was really fun. It added this little extra element of challenge and maybe a little edge of nervousness of wondering whether or not I could get through something. And so I would find myself in situations where I would see little trails that, I wonder if I can get up that in the Forester. And so I would try, even if it was not necessarily even someplace that I wanted or needed to go. Driving the Frontier, I see some of these little challenging little spots, maybe off this way or off that way, and I look at them and I know that I can drive up it. And so I don't feel like I need to even go and try. I've got nothing to prove. I know the Frontier is going to handle virtually anything that I point it at least in the kinds of places that I go when I'm by myself. And as much as I love the capabilities of the Frontier, I do miss that little element of sort of challenge. It's like, oh, look at that. Can I do it? Can the Forester do it? That was fun. That was a lot of fun. And when the Forester would actually manage to tackle some of those obstacles, you know, there was an extra feeling of sort of triumph. Now, those are really the only things that I miss about the Forester. Pretty much in every other way, I do prefer the Frontier, but there are some specific details we can talk about. Now, first of all is simply space. And this is a compact truck, but I have so much more space than I did in the Forester. And I can camp inside this vehicle in the back of my truck. With both of the camping setups that I've had on this truck, I've been able to be on my feet, move around. With my current Topo Toppers Mesa pop-up camper, I can fully stand up. Also, just here in the cab of the truck, I've got much more space to integrate storage, my fridge, carrying my camera gear, firewood. I've just got so much more space. It's so much easier to carry everything that I need for a week-long trip in this truck than I did with the Forester. Now, another way I prefer the Frontier, which may actually come as a surprise, is actually the ride on the highway. Now, it's even before I upgraded the suspension to the All Dogs Off-Road package that I have, which greatly improved the ride of the truck off-road. But even before that, this truck always felt better to me at highway speeds going down the highway than the Forester ever did. It just feels more planted. It feels like it just absorbs the smaller bumps better than the Forester did. And so it feels just smoother somehow. It's more comfortable. I feel less sort of tensed up. I feel more relaxed. I feel more rested after a long day of highway driving in the truck than I did in the Forester. And that honestly surprised me because the Forester was nice on the road and it's a car. It had car suspension. And I thought I'd be giving up some of that comfort moving to a truck. But to my surprise, the truck has been more comfortable for long highway drives. But by far the biggest and probably most obvious way the Frontier is better than the Forester is simply its capability off-road. There's no comparison. When I can put this thing into four-wheel drive and shift it into low range, the Forester was remarkably capable, but there are things that this truck can do that Forester couldn't touch. On top of that, with the larger tires, better approach angle, I can get over obstacles that the Forester would never dream of being able to get over. Some of the stuff that I encountered in Utah, for example, was fairly soon after I got the truck and was still accustomed to what I could and couldn't do in the Forester. And there were places where I was looking at these rock steps and I was like, well, shoot, I have to turn around. And then I was like, well, let's see. And the Frontier would just climb right up. For the first couple of years of driving this truck, I was repeatedly astonished by how much better it did than the Forester in certain situations. My Frontier also is equipped with a factory rear locker. Now I can probably count on one hand the number of times I've needed to use the locker, but when I did have to use the locker, it was really valuable. It made the difference. So to sort of bring all that to a conclusion, do I prefer the Frontier? Yes. Do I miss the Forester? Yes. That Forester was my favorite car I'd ever owned up to that point. And it was my third Subaru, but it was definitely my best Subaru. That was an excellent car, but the Frontier, is even better. I love this truck. I love this truck with the camper on the back. I love that it has pretty much gone every single place that I've pointed it. So much fun to get out and explore the backcountry in this truck. So I hope that answers the question in one way or another. If you have any questions about what I've talked about here, post them in the comments below. Thank you for watching.